G'day, Shane Dowling here from the website and YouTube channel Kangaroo Court of Australia, and this is the first 2025 federal election podcast. And I'm joined with Fiona Patten, Miles Hunt and Belinda Jones, who are Senate candidates. You want to introduce yourself and just tell the viewers a little bit about yourselves? Fiona, you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks, Shane, and thanks very much for having us. My name's Fiona Patten. I'm the lead Victorian Senate candidate for the Legalised Cannabis Party. I was a Member of Parliament in Victoria for 8 years under the Reason Party and also the Sex Party, but I've always been a huge advocate for drug law reform, but also around civil liberties and a range of issues that affect the community that votes for legalised cannabis.
And Miles?
Yeah, my name's Miles Hunt. Thanks for having me on, Shane. I'm a lead candidate for the Senate in New South Wales for legalised cannabis. I have a history as a lawyer, been involved in drug law reform for about 15 years. Started a charity called Unharm, which is a harm reduction organisation with a friend of mine, Will Dragoni, who runs it now, and ran for the Senate about 10 years ago for the drug law reform, which was a drug reform party from the past, and have been come out about my own drug use and tried to be an advocate throughout the last 15 years, although I've had some young kids in between. So I'm back now and I'm feeling glad to be on the ticket for the Legalised Cannabis Party.
And Belinda, we did an interview a couple of weeks ago or a week ago. You want to just remind people who you are?
Thanks, Shane. Thanks so much for having me. And I'm Belinda Jones. I'm the lead Senate candidate for Legalised Cannabis Party in Queensland. I am a medicinal cannabis user. I use CBD oils and other products. And it's been a real life changer for me. I've been a strong advocate for legalising cannabis, and I'm happy and proud to represent this party and our values and what we can bring to Parliament. We do things a little bit differently. We defined by our values, and we want to bring change and positive change and to help all Australians economically and health-wise. And forgive me, I've just come from the Queensland Senate draw. We will be in column O, and I'm sitting in a park in Brisbane, so I'll stop talking now. So we'll block out that background noise.
We're going to try and cover as many topics as possible that are relevant to the current election. The first one, the main one, is obviously cost of living. I spoke before about Anthony Albanese saying in one of his ads, I'm seeing on TV all the time, he's saying Australia has turned a corner. And I remember thinking, well, if we turned a corner, we've gone down the wrong way in a one-way street. Because we've just broken through, or about to break through $1 trillion in debt. And the forecast in the last budget a couple of days ago is that the next 10 years are going to be deficits. So we're going to be putting in a huge amount of debt on future generations on their credit card, in effect. And no one's talking about that. I don't know why. Obviously, the major parties don't want to talk about it because they don't have the solutions, obviously. Otherwise, they would be talking about it. But I think at the next election in 3 years is going to be front and centre, because over the next 3 years, we're going to have deficit after deficit, and that's going to be a big issue. What are your viewpoints on that, and how do you think you would approach it in government?
Look, I think I'll start. I'm sure the Miles and Bea will have other things to say. Look, yes, we are in an absolute cost of living crisis, and when I'm out on the street and talking to people, they're really struggling to meet the needs of their family, to pay their groceries, to pay their rent, to pay their mortgages. But it is chaos out there in the global market right now. In some ways, Australia is a little bit caught in the windstorms of the US, of China. However, what we can do in Australia to improve our situation, certainly, going back to our policies, would be, there's a $5 billion cannabis industry out there that is untaxed and goes to organised crime. So we'd certainly look at closing that and regulating cannabis. We have a $2 billion spend on keeping the prohibition of cannabis. That money could be far better spent. But in many ways, as a small party, what we need to be doing is we're not going to have the checkbook. We're not going to have the pen for the checkbook, to be honest. But what we can do is hold the government accountable. We can require transparency. We can ask those questions. And we can ask those questions about how they are going to bring down that deficit, how they are going to stop adding trillions of dollars to the next generation. So I think our role, and particularly as senators, our role is to keep the government to account. But as I say, I'm not going to be the treasurer. And so, for us to sort of have a plan to pull down the deficit, I don't have that, but I'm certainly going to be there to ask the right questions.
Miles?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that we're sort of a revolutionary party in the fact that we're creating two potential industries here in cannabis and hemp, which untapped. I don't see any other party creating two industries out of nothing. So potentially we could have a huge effect just by bringing those policies in and taxing, using the right excise on cannabis, growing a hemp industry in terms of creating a sustainable, clothing and hempcrete, and there's a lot of biodegradable plastics. It's potentially world changing. So I think when people say we're a one policy party, we're actually bringing parties that have can change things in a huge way. In terms of budget deficits, I mean, it's a difficult question. I think it's the big parties don't want to face reality in some respects, and I think voters too are a bit scared. The reality is that if you want to bring down costs, you either have to cut costs or raise more money from tax. And I mean, we can create an excise on cannabis, but other taxes, mining tax, things like that, carbon tax, they've been voted down by the people, and new parties have brought them down. So, I mean, there's institutional and structural problems that are difficult to resolve, and as Fiona says, if we're in party, we're not beholden to the interests of parties. We're not beholden to the lobby groups and things like that. So we can look at things probably in a more proactive way and consider alternative ways to resolve those issues. But I think they're very complicated, and I can see they're huge. They're difficult to change the way the parties have been going over time. So,
and Belinda?
Well, I agree with all of the above. On a very, very basic level, if we can make changes to federal legislation, a number of federal legislations, what that will mean is we'll help pave the way for states to legalise cannabis and make those changes to state laws. And if we can achieve that, then on a very basic level, we'll have grow at home. There's cost of relief for the voter, saving hundreds of dollars for people, many of whom are going through quite, devastating illnesses and life-impacting illnesses. And the last thing they need is have to struggle to buy their medication. And then on a broader scale, from the Senate perspective, as Miles and Fiona has said, we will be perfectly placed to be in a position to hold the government to account. And, if you suggest to the government right now, let's ban alcohol, and they'll say, oh no, we make too much revenue out of that. Well, that's the untapped potential of cannabis. We are the party who is bringing solutions to the Australian people. We are bringing, we want to advocate to get hemp and cannabis legalised so we can kick the hemp industry off at scale and really reach its potential, which will generate a lot of revenue. And I would very, very much open to having a really good look at tax reform and seeing what's fit for purpose and what's out of date and what we can make better, especially around housing, to try and help younger people. I'm a grandmother, mother of three and grandmother, and not one of my three children is in a position to be able to buy a house. And I think that's incumbent on anyone who is elected at this election to take a good hard look at that and see how we can improve things for young Australians to get into a home.
Could I just add just a little tiny 30-second anecdote to that? I was recently in New York where they legalized cannabis. The first license for a retail store was to a charity called Housing Works. That charity, in its first year of having that store, turned over $24 million. Now, that money is going straight back into community housing, social housing, and helping people experience homelessness. Now, that lifts the boat for us all. And I think these are just examples of the quite long thread of assistance that legalizing cannabis can do.
Can I just add to that? That's wonderful, Fiona. That's really a positive outcome, and that's what we're all about. We're presenting different solutions and breaking down those barriers and saying, look, we can do this. It is possible, but we all have to work together and think about new things, new ways of doing things, new ideas, and breaking down those stereotypes that are holding us back.
Yeah, I mean, if you got 10 to 15% of the population who are regular cannabis users who are criminalized automatically by the society, by the community, it creates a stigma. But, those people are sort of not necessarily connected to our community as much as they should be because of the fact that they're criminalized by an unjust law. So I think you bring those people into the fold, you reduce the costs on the police. The police are probably, relationships with community and police are going to increase. I think that there's so much potential related to this idea that legalized cannabis is really pushing.
We'll move on to AUKUS at the moment. Now, might sound odd, $368 billion on 8 submarines, but it ties in with accountability, and Fiona was talking about that before, because the UK have set up a review the last few days because they're worried about the US being, crazy, in effect, not a reliable partner for defence anymore. So they've set up a review. And I'm just reading the last day that the US have set up a review. They're going to get Elon Musk to review whether they can produce enough submarines anyhow. Whether that's tied into AUKUS, I'm not too sure, but he's reviewing the submarines in the US. They've got their own issues about supplying themselves. And the thing is, the Prime Minister in the last day said, he's backed in against AUKUS again. He fully supports it. Whereas the UK of having a review, if they're having a review, why can't we have a review? And I noticed some of the Teals have said that they'll be asking for a review as well. What's your position on that from accountability? Because a lot of people think the $368 billion is, I regard as nothing but more than a slush fund for retired politicians. What's your opinion on that and the accountability side and supporting a review? You've gone silent there.
Yeah.
I know you.
Is that working now?
Yeah, that's going.
It's weird for me to be saying something nice about Anthony Albanese, and it's probably not that nice, but he is in the middle of an election campaign. So the idea that he would be calling for a review on a policy that he has endorsed right now is not to be expected. I don't expect the major parties to do that. I think reviewing our relationship with the EU.
Oh, you cut out again.
In AUKUS is absolutely crucial. We
Are you cutting out again? Sorry.
I think my
Yeah. All good.
I think it's my headphones are just on their last legs.
Yep.
But what I wanted to say is I'm not surprised that the Prime Minister is not doing any backtracking on AUKUS right now in the middle of an election. However, I think when the other two partners in AUKUS are reviewing their position in AUKUS, it makes complete sense for Australia after the election to be reviewing its position in AUKUS.
Miles, do you have a viewpoint?
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously times are changing with the relationship with the US. There are concerns that are widespread through the community. I know I work in the arts union, and we have concerns as a union in relation to the trade relationship in terms of online content for streamers and things like this. There's a huge number of issues there that are raised, but this is the relationship with Australia and America is a long-standing one. It's hard to come up with a solution quickly to this issue and to see how it develops in terms of the current president and the relationship with Australia. I mean, as the Legalised Cannabis Party, if we are elected to the Senate, obviously any sort of legislation or considerations around defence would come to us, but ultimately this is a sort of decision for the government of the day, and hopefully we can bring a new perspective on these sort of things. And ultimately, I agree with Fiona. Any relationship is worth reviewing and considering on a regular basis, particularly with the sort of changes we've seen recently. And but it's a difficult one. And from the cannabis perspective, America is an example of a country that has legalized cannabis, and we can use the example in that relationship in the way they're dealt with the states and how the problems between federal and state have been created. And we'd like to see a sort of more national approach by sort of legalizing cannabis federally, allowing the states to then open up their markets. I mean, certainly we need to consider the way America has dealt with cannabis and use that as an example for legalization. But in terms of defense, I mean, that we don't really have a position at the moment on that as a party.
I'll go to you, Belinda, but just firstly, I want to say this. I forgot to mention that another issue that's been raised in the last few days is that the cost of AUKUS, the $368 billion, could go through the roof with the tariffs, because we don't know, the tariffs are changing every couple of days.
Yeah. I know.
So your viewpoint, Belinda?
Well, I don't think any review should be considered extraordinary. I think it should be extraordinary if we don't do it. It should be ordinary practice of things like this, especially with a price tag of $368 billion plus tariffs. It should have been factored in from day one to have regular reviews to see if this is going on track. Now, I'd like to use the analogy, no business person would hire someone and come back in 8 years to see how they're doing. They'd be checking on them, and that's what we should be doing. So I don't think it's extraordinary at all to ask for a review, and I would certainly be supportive of that. And certainly from our values perspective, Legalised Cannabis Party, one of our core values is peace and pacifism. And I think we'll see where the tariffs takes us, but yeah, there is a big question mark hanging over that, and that goes across the board of everything in this current geopolitical climate. So we have to be open. We have to go into things with open minds and open hearts and look at everything and make the best decision in line with our values, which are well stated. And I think common sense and bringing that sensible centre back to politics and making really informed evidence-based policy decisions. And I think if we stick to those core values and our integrity, then it doesn't matter what issue comes before Parliament or before the Senate. Legalised cannabis we are very well positioned to make good quality decisions based on the facts, and that will resonate and help Australians, and that's our core focus. Our core focus is helping and serving our country.
Yeah, and I think the tariffs raise an issue about importing. I mean, we import a lot of our medicinal cannabis currently, so we really support growing having a cannabis industry in Australia and a hemp industry in Australia. And I think tariffs and that sort of attitude at the moment is making people realize the importance of having industries within a country because of these geopolitical situations that may be outside our control. One thing we can control if we do legalize cannabis and we do open up the hemp market is promoting an Australian industry and encouraging us to grow and have an industry, vertical industry across the country.
Now, we lost Belinda at the moment, but she might just be doing something. Now, the next issue I wanted to raise was I've done a couple articles about truth in elections, in effect. I've just done an article on Peter Dutton attacking independent Ellie Smith with lies about being a Green. Now, that's an old trick. They did that the last election too. I think they accused the Senator David Pocock of being a Green in 2022, etc. So I wanted to ask you about, attacks on yous. Like I spoke about it before. One of the attacks is they say, oh, you're only one party. I mean, you're one issue party, but the reality is the key issue you're driving is ethics in politics, which we don't have at the moment. Yeah. Do you get attacked much or with lies? I mean,
look, I mean, I've had 8 years in as a person who held balance of power in a parliament, so I've heard everything about me. Most of it not true, and certainly this notion that the Cannabis Party is a bunch of stoners, that it's a one issue party. Yeah, we hear that all the time. However, I think this idea of transparency and truth in political advertising is really important. Now, our fundamental values are around having evidence-based policy, having civil liberties and transparency. So it seems bizarre that this is, that electoral systems, electoral campaigns are almost exempt from just about everything. We're exempt from, putting things into letterboxes. We're exempt from a whole range of things, and we're exempt from telling the truth. I mean, this seems particularly I think it probably just explains why people have lost trust in politics. When you've got, the major parties yelling lies about each other, putting out, smear campaigns, no wonder the population has lost its faith in the political system. The three of us have just come from the ballot nominations and the ballot draw with the AEC. And to me, that restores my faith in our democratic system, that the AEC is so stringent. However, when we don't have truth in advertising, in political advertising, when people can just tell porkies throughout a campaign, it brings us all down. And as I say, it diminishes the faith that people have in governments and in our systems.
Yeah. I think the legalized, cannabis, cannabis community has suffered smear campaigns for a century during Prohibition. I mean, the reefer madness campaigns in America and the way Prohibition was sort of foisted upon the people for a multiple, corporate interests in America trying to shut down the hemp industry, whether that was, paper or hemp, cotton, as well as the way race, it was used to shut down on, it was a racist policy to attack a drug that was used by Black Americans, or marijuana. The term even was used to create a connection with Mexico, so there is this history of lies about cannabis which have led to its prohibition and have led to the fact that we have a stigma around a plant which has so many medicinal qualities, has been used by humans for thousands of years for many beneficial reasons, and humans have for 100 years have prohibited it and turned it into a stigmatized, created a taboo. So I mean, cannabis people can associate that more than anyone. So I think as a whole, I think our party is trying to be positive. We're trying to change the way people deal with this drug, the way that people use this plant, try to make a positive campaign where we treat everyone in a positive, respectful way, because I think cannabis users have suffered the reverse of that. So I think that in a way, our party is particularly can really connect with this concept and believe we want a better future, a better politics, a way people deal with each other in a positive way. We want to change things so we're not we're using evidence-based policy, and we're doing things in a truthful, beneficial way for society. And I think that that's failed. So politics the people are sick of the major parties, because I think a lot of this, where there's a belief that the current system has failed the people and doesn't do it in things in an honest and respectful way.
Belinda, we lost you there for a minute, but we were just talking about truth in advertising. I've just done a story, and I've done a couple stories now in the last couple of weeks on truth in advertising. I just did a story on Peter Dutton attacking independent Ellie Smith with lies about her being a Green. On the fly, he sent out, it's even got a picture of Greens leader Adam Bant on, which is ridiculous, but he's done it. And I just asking about your experience with people telling lies about the legalised cannabis party, etc.
Oh, it is. It's quite a common thing. I personally get accused of being affiliated with other political parties, and there are lies told about our party. It spreads across the board, and I think it really is wrong. It's wrong, but from the voters' perspective, and we just have to. It doesn't matter whether it's our internal workspaces, our communications, our marketing, but we want to bring integrity to politics. We want to restore people's trust. And we can't control the behaviour of other parties, but we can control ours. So people can rely on Legalised Cannabis Party for the truth, and we want to champion the truth. We will certainly be supportive of bringing the truth and integrity back to the Australian democratic system. There's so much underhanded nonsense and poor marketing, deliberately poor marketing.
And it comes from both sides as well. It's not just one side of politics.
It does. And I'll just I reflect on a Twitter post that I saw the other day. It was clearly a bot. People, the political parties are spending a lot of money purchasing bots online, and they do and say, they say the most ridiculous things, and people then think, oh, there are some very, very stupid people around who would believe that. But it's not. That's a misconception. These bots are a deliberate political strategy to undermine our democracy and seed doubt and cause division. It's not silly people saying silly things. It's a clandestine individual or group who are doing it deliberately, and that's where we need to, we need to focus our attentions and stop these clandestine groups from influencing politics, and just bring integrity and trust back to politics, and stop the bullshit that's going on, basically.
What I wanted to also touch on two more points, and I wanted to ask you more, Fiona, about one of the key issues is people are complaining, or not complaining, but the Labor Party and the Liberal Party and the Nationals drive home, oh, we can't have a hung parliament, we can't have a minority government because it won't survive, and all this dribble.
I know.
When you look back, I wasn't a fan of Julia Gillard, but she did run a successful government as far as passing legislation is concerned.
Yeah.
And you just said you had experience of being you were part of a minority government.
Well, I wasn't part of a minority government, but let's remember that no legislation passes unless it passes the Senate. So the lower house the government may have to negotiate in the lower house. I don't think that's that is a bad thing. And I think Julia Gillard, the time that Julia Gillard was in a minority government, actually proved that you can make a lot of change and you can introduce and you can pass progressive and really substantial legislation in minority. But the fact of the matter is that the governments rarely have the balance of power in both houses. So it always comes to the Senate, and they're always, certainly in the last 10 to 15 years, the government has never had a majority. So the government has always had to negotiate with other parties. So this idea, it's a complete furphy around that, because governments have always had to negotiate. Now, I put up more, I can't remember how many, I put up more private members' bills than anyone else had in the parliament. Now, and numerous of those passed. Now, I was just one person, and I was able to affect change on, some really significant issues. So no one should underestimate the power of small parties and independents like ourselves to make change. And as I say, it is complete bollocks for the major parties to say that the country cannot run unless they have full balance in the lower house, because they will never have it in the upper house. So they will always have to negotiate. And I think we only have to look at all of the variety of European countries that have operated in coalition governments and multi-party governments for decades.
Mm. Do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I think agree. I think like I grew up in a teal seat actually, and I see the people in where I grew up now. I don't live there now, voting for these teal independents instead of say the coalition, and I think that's a win. I think that's fantastic. There's these independents who are not beholden to party rules. They're not necessarily affected by lobby and interest groups as much as people in the major parties. I really think that it's a positive for democracy that we could have independents or smaller parties having a contribution to say, rather than a two-party system. And as Fiona says, it's regular in Europe. No one governs on their own right in Europe. Everything's almost a coalition, nearly in every country there. And I think the polarization of democracy in America is an example of the opposite. I think, I think that, the current system is failing the people. The two parties haven't been able to make meaningful change on a number of issues. Housing's become totally unaffordable. Cost of living's out of control. As you said, the debt's out of control. These things that need structural reform, like tax and things like that, and dealing with trying to, get investment in positive things, reducing negative things, is something that it seems too impossible for the parties currently to do. So why not try a different way? And I think a minority government could be really beneficial for this country, personally.
And Belinda?
Oh, I think when the major parties, pursue political narratives that they don't like hung parliaments, what they're really saying, that can be translated as it's more difficult for us and we lose some of our control. And they are pushing for majority government, obviously, because it's easier for them. They don't have to negotiate and they, but in a hung parliament, they have to work hard. They have to work harder to get everything across the line. They have to keep those relationships within the Senate and the House of Reps respectful and open, and and that is challenging when they want total control. But it is the Australian people who decides our parliaments and not the major parties. And quite frankly, I don't really give a rat's if it's easier for them. That's not what this is about. It's about democracy. It's about people, the Australian people choosing our parliament, the best parliament we can be. And then whoever that the Australian people choose, it is then incumbent on us to get on with the job, build those relationships and networks, and work out how much we can do for the Australian people. How do we get as much legislation and bills through and not be obstructionist. Just keep moving that ball forward like a footy game. Every single time we rock up to Parliament, we want to move that ball forward. And, but you keep doing that, eventually you're going to score a try.
And I thought we'd finish off, or maybe one more question after that, is you can't avoid it. It's everywhere. You go to the websites, it's all over the place. Trump, his influence on the election, it's getting mentioned all the time. Albanese and Peter Dutton are getting asked questions on a daily basis about Trump. And he's obviously had an influence on the Liberal Party. Peter Dutton's a bit of a supporter, and some of his backbenchers are even bigger supporters. Then you got Australia's own clown in politics, Clive Palmer's trumpet of patriots. Can't believe he's doing that. But one of the issues he drives home is the uni party. Well, he's part of the uni party, as far as I can see, just trying to get a few preferences for the Liberals. What's your viewpoints on that, Trump and his influence on Australia? On an election mainly,
Look, it does feel like we do have a third political leader influencing this election, and that certainly is Trump. Looking at the Trumpeter Patriots, which have brought us great things like Ralph Babbitt, and I apologise to all us other Australians that he is a Victorian, and I'm sorry. I'd just like to say that everyone thinks he's from Queensland, and up until recently, I just let them think that. But no, he is a Victorian senator, and he's an embarrassment. He's an absolute embarrassment.
That's all right. Send him up to me. I'll sort him out.
I think what Clive Palmer's trying to do and how he's trying to, his idea of buying an election, unfortunately, it wasn't successful for him in the last time. I think he won't be successful. I hope he won't be successful, because in a lot of the races to the 6th seat in the Senate, it will come down to legalised cannabis and the Trumpeter Patriots. So we actually will probably be in a death roll for that final seat with Trumpeter Patriots. However, I think he's backed the wrong horse, and I think most Australians have really seen Trump for who he is, and I think Australians from every background are really rethinking their notion of Trump and therefore people like Clive Palmer and his Trumpeter Patriots.
Miles?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that the Liberal Party, I think the coalition's been going down in the polls since Trump sort of began his wrecking process of, the international system. And I think that just shows that it's actually been negative. That riding the Trump wave to success won't work in this country. And we've seen it in Canada. The polls have changed around for their government now as a result of Trump. So I think that's a positive. I think it shows that people in Australia don't want that sort of democracy. We don't want to have a Trump-type leader. And I think Clive Palmer, the billionaire, I mean, he nearly didn't make it onto this ballot, and now here with the Trumpeter Patriots, it seems almost comical. I think I don't really understand. The policies don't seem to be coherent often. I think most people in Australia can see through that and don't see any value. And hopefully, the legalised cannabis is able to get those 6 seats in the Senate ahead of Trump as a patriot. But we'll see. It's certainly been an interesting election, and the politics of the international system are certainly making their waves felt. It's changing things to an extent. Whether how it ends in the future, well, we'll have to wait and see, really.
And Belinda?
When it comes to Donald Trump, I think he's far more of a symptom of a dysfunctional democracy than a solution. I think he's causing some really catastrophic pain around the world, causing chaos. And that's, it doesn't matter what environment you're in, whether you're in a home or family environment, a work environment, a organisation, volunteer environment, that doesn't work. common sense, respectful debate, working together, collaboration, negotiation, diplomacy, that's what works. So we know that. I think Trump's very much going to run his own course, but look, it's a difficult subject, but I would just say that if any person genuinely thinks that multi-billionaires are working for the working class, then to me, that's akin to thinking the stripper is actually in love with you. Okay? I think I'll just leave it at that.
Well, can I just add quickly? I think, as Lee was suggesting, I mean, people obviously turn to Trump in desperation for a failing system. People across the world are upset that their standard of living is dropping. And there are a multitude of factors at play here, not least, I would think, that the influence of corporations on democracy and the way that people have been left behind and the influence of money. And I think that Trump is not going to be, as B said, a billionaire is probably not going to help the people, but I can see why people are fed up and have turned to this populist sort of these populist leaders. And, I think it makes sense, but hopefully we can turn back to a better, more rational way of doing things. And I think that change is necessary, and legalized cannabis is about change. So.
100%, Miles, exactly right.
I thought we'd leave it there. We're getting around the 50-minute mark.
Okay.
And unless you want to have something further to say, I'm probably going to try and do a podcast once a week up until election. Only another 3 weeks to go, so probably another 3, just to cover topics that are on their agenda during that week. So did you have anything you just wanted to finish off with? And one of you can obviously direct people to your website. You did it last time, Belinda. Do you know how to do that? And
Miles?
tell people tell people how they can.
Or Belinda,
volunteer.
she's good at it.
Yeah. We can. You can find us online. Look for the leaf we're saying to people out in the ballot box. We're going to have the cannabis leaf on the House of Reps and Senate voting ballot, so you can look for the leaf. You can follow us on Facebook. We've all got Facebook pages, and the Legalised Cannabis Australia's got a website, and certainly we've got donations and ways you can volunteer and assist. We're a grassroots organisation. We've got people out there. I've been delivering core flutes all around the state to people, and how we're going to have how to vote cards, and people are doing this volunteering because they're passionate about what we're doing, and it's great. It's great to see the community out there, and it's a tough thing to run an election and to fight against the big parties with lots of money, but we're doing our best.
So the website's legalised cannabis party.com or .org?
.org.
.org.au. Now
it's legalisedcannabis.org. Yeah, you can find us at legalisedcannabis.org.au.
And Miles, you just mentioned core flutes. Can people contact you and get a core flute for their yard? Can they?
Yeah. And
I think that'd be a big hit myself.
Yeah.
I think they are the most stolen core flutes in the whole election. So core flute gate has nothing on Cannabis Party.
People want to chain them down then.
Can I finish on one note? Thank you for having us, Shane. It's been lovely to have a chat. As you all know, I'm a SES volunteer, and I've just come back from deployment out in Western Queensland. The floodwaters that are travelling down the Channel Country into the Warrego and down the Murray and then down through Birdsville and headed towards Lake Eyre. There are a lot of rural communities in Western Queensland who, are really, really doing it tough. And sadly, with our 24/7 news cycle, I'm back to the city and I'm not hearing a lot about it. So I'd just like to send our love from Legalised Cannabis out to those people. And I'll actually be going out on deployment again. I'm going to try and get another deployment in before we kick off the election, because I really want to get back out there and do what I can to help those people so they're And those floodwaters are travelling down, heading into northern New South Wales and South Australia, which they'll be filling up Lake Eyre, which will be a sight to behold. Our Channel Country and Lake Eyre and Murray-Darling system is going to bloom and come to life, and you'll see the magic that is our flooding rains and fire that this beautiful country is. So just a shout out to those people doing it tough. You know, they're really doing it tough. Some people have lost everything. So they're in our hearts and our thoughts, and yeah, hopefully I'll get back out there on Monday and I can help them out. So, and I understand everyone's got a lot going on. There's Easter and school holidays. It's a really crazy campaign, this one. And yeah, everyone's doing it tough, but those people in Western Queensland are just doing it a bit tougher than most at the moment. So all our love to them. And if we can help, we will. The city will send some help out to you guys.
So we'll leave it there. Thanks for your time, and we'll try and catch up
Thanks,
again
Shane.
next week.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Shane.
See you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
See you.
Bye, Fiona. Bye, Miles.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Shane.